place seemed safe from mortals. One frosty autumn morning, however, a man walked slowly along the edge of the haunted wood, peering about him with sharp, well-trained eyes. He wore a red jerkin for warmth and thick leggings to protect him against thorns and brambles, a curving hollow ox horn, chased with silver, hung by a strap from his shoulder. Beside him, straining at the stout leash he held, paced a heavy-set hound, its nose close to the ground, its long ears swaying as its head swung from side to side. The man was a limmerer, one of the huntsmen of a Breton lord whose name has been lost. His task that morning was the first step in the stately ritual of the medieval hunt. With the limer, or bloodhound, he had been assigned to find and track a stag to its lair and mark its position so that the lord and the lord's hunting party could pursue it. On this morning, however, the limmerer found something that surpassed even the most royal of stags. He found it suddenly, between one step and the next. He froze where he stood, staring. The dog, too, paused motionless. A unicorn loomed before them in the gloom of the wood, a pale shadow against the black columns of the tree trunks. The beast's muscles swelled smoothly under a coat as white as moonlight. The spiralling horn, worth many times its weight in gold, shone like pearl. For a moment, the unicorn's dark and liquid eyes remained fastened upon the intruding man and his dog. Then the creature turned and trotted back into the forest of Broceliande. Its hooves made no sound in the morning quiet. An expert at his craft, the limmerer did nothing to startle the beast. He made neither sound nor move until after the unicorn had vanished among the trees. Then he carefully noted his position and devised an arrangement of twigs to indicate the direction the quarry had taken. Afterward, with his dog panting beside him, he made off across the stubbled fields toward the distant towers of his master's fortress. Within 2 hours, the limmerer returned to the verge of the forest, and this time he was not alone. He led a glittering procession, in plumed hats and brocaded doublets, in velvets and silk. The lord with his courtiers and his lady with her maidens rode toward the wood, the bells on their bridles ringing As if it knew its hour had come, it stepped forward, calm now, sank to its knees before the girl, leaned its ivory-crowned head gently against her side, and gave itself up to its fate. Death came in an instant. The Lord rode forward and lifted the maiden out of harm's way, and the hounds burst from the wood, lunging at she later bore was the sage Confucius, a throneless king indeed. His teachings gave rise to the system of order and obedience that shaped Chinese thought and government for centuries. The Qi Lin was invariably a benefactor. It could tell good from evil. The Chinese wrote, "It ate no living thing, and its appearance preceded the birth of great men, such as Confucius." Images of the beast were affixed to the crimson chairs that traditionally carried Chinese brides to the homes of their new husbands, and were pasted on the doors of the women's quarters in the thousands of Asian homes to ensure auspicious births. The Chinese unicorn walked so softly that its hooves made no sound. It was as noble as the unicorns that ranged the European forests, but it lacked their fierceness, and Cressius's tales may have derived not from descriptions of this creature, but from garbled reports concerning a wolf-fish, single-horned beast that inhabited the plains of Persia and India. That creature was known variously as the Garg or Gargadan. A solitary predator, it was so ferocious that wild animals refused to graze anywhere within its territory. Its strength was such that it successfully attacked even elephants. The slaying of the beast was a star in any prince's crown. Although singular in its aggressiveness, the Gargadan shared two characteristics with the unicorns of Europe. It was said that the beast could be tamed by the presence of young women, and that knife handles made from its horn exuded a kind of sweat, trembling violently in the presence of poison. The first of these characteristics has never been satisfactorily explained, although scholars in Europe devoted endless investigation and speculation to the problem. Christians preferred to believe that the presence of a maiden acted on the creature as a balm, faced with perfect purity. The unicorn, noblest beast of the elder world, fell to its knees in willing scattered there harboured strange and savage beings worthy to test a warrior's mettle. One day the king found himself becalmed in a heavy fog. The little vessel drifted, its soaked sail flapping, until at last it grated onto a pebbly shore. The king sprang out, pulled the boat up onto the shingle and set off inland to find whatever might await him. this was its source. Arthur bowed his head before the unicorn. Tears stood in his eyes. Much as he desired to, he knew he could not stay in this sweet place. He had many leagues to travel and deeds to do before he could rest, but the unicorn and its two humble companions had revealed to him what true peace and harmony were. The king soon left the island. When the mist lifted and the wind freshened, the dwarf and his son took him to the shore. They told him how to navigate to reach the outer islands he sought, and they helped him put to sea again. As Arthur brought the little boat about and wind filled the sail, he looked back toward the island. The two men stood on the shingle, waving him on his way, and behind them, among the dark trees, a star-like glimmer showed where the unicorn stood. King Arthur became his own legend. He himself was the soul of chivalry, and more than that, a font of generosity and kindness. He had looked upon a mystery, and for a moment was bathed in its enchantment, but in his wisdom he had never sought to master it. He was unique among humankind. Most mortals hunted the unicorn for the splendid sport it gave, and for its ivory horn, in which all the creature's grace and purity seemed centred. The horn's efficacy was well known by Arthur's time, for scholars had the manuscripts of the 2nd century Roman Claudius Aelianus called Aelian. This naturalist emulated Cressius of Cnidus in his description of the unicorn of India, but he said that the animal's horn was spiraled, and he went on to state, "These variegated horns, I learn, are used as drinking cups by the Indians, although not, to be sure, by all of the people. Only the great men use them, after having them ringed about their hoops of gold, exactly as they would put bracelets on some beautiful statue. And it is said that whosoever drinks from this kind of horn is safe